Hi, I'm Cliff, and this is my garage. Today, we're going to continue our upgrade on the Cayman's braking system by rebuilding the calipers with new high-temperature components, as well as upgrading the rubber brake lines to braided stainless steel. Hey, welcome back to the garage. And if this is your first time joining me, thanks for dropping by. This is part two of my brake upgrades on the Cayman to get it to the point where it's better on the track. Now, if you didn't see part one, where I explained everything I'm going to do and why I'm doing it and all the background on it, I'll give you a link right up here, this corner, to that video. Go check that out. In part one, we replaced the stock cross-drilled rotors with these new slotted rotors from Sebro. And we also upgraded the stock Cayman Techstar pads to some Pagid RSL1 pads. And let me tell you, the difference was really dramatic. The increase in braking power was just hard to believe. I'm practically having to peel my eyeballs off the inside of the windshield after doing a really hard stop. The increase and change in the braking has been very, very dramatic. Now, we'll see how that works out on the track itself next weekend when I go back to Sebring, but for the moment, I'm really impressed with what we did last time. In this episode, the changes we're going to make are not going to be that dramatic in terms of braking performance. There's going to be some change from the brake lines, but overall not a whole lot. Today, we're primarily going after longevity of the system and mainly dealing with heat. Now, if you remember from last time, I told you how when I checked out the calipers after my latest track day, I discovered that the stock dust boots in the calipers had melted because the heat had become so high that they just came apart. Also, with the brake lines, I didn't have a problem per se with those, but rubber brake lines are susceptible to becoming hot and maybe a little soft and contributing to a mushy feeling on the brakes, which I was definitely experiencing last time on the track, although primarily that came from the truly second, third-rate brake fluid that Porsche had put in. Again, if you want that whole story of how Porsche screwed up, check out the last episode. In today's episode, we're going to accomplish a couple things. First, we're going to take the calipers off and disassemble them and clean them up, and we're going to replace all the internal seals and the dust boots with these high-temperature silicone versions that I got from Ohio Performance Solutions. We're also going to go remove the stock rubber brake lines, the flexible portion, and replace them with these Goodrich braided stainless steel lines that I got from Flat Six Motorsports, a small Porsche-focused company right here in Florida. Fantastic little business. John is a great guy, answers tons of questions, is good. It will help you out so much if you have anything you need for any type of a Porsche. He's your guy. Rebuilding your brake calipers may sound like kind of a daunting task, but it really isn't. Brake calipers are fairly simple little things. They're very straightforward, and rebuilding them, that rebuild sounds like kind of a scary word, but it's really not that big of a deal. It's very straightforward, and your average DIYer can certainly handle it. Let's get started. There's just no two ways about it. This is a messy job. So you want some good nitrile gloves. I like these orange, what are they called? GloveWorks HD. They're heavy duty. They're like twice as thick as a normal nitrile glove, and they have a nice textured pattern on them, give you some grip in slippery situations. They're by far the best nitrile gloves I've ever used. I actually reuse them. Normal nitrile gloves, you use them once, you take them off, you throw them away. These, I put some soap on my hands, wash them like normal, let them dry, and stick them back in the box. I get, I don't know, 5, 10 uses out of every pair, depending on what I'm doing. So I'll give you a link to these. They sell them on Amazon. Really, really recommended. Not only are you going to get brake fluid all over your hands, there's also, well, I suppose it's theoretically possible to do this job without dripping brake fluid all over the floor. I can't manage it. So in order to keep that under control, you can do a couple things. You could put a pan down on the floor to catch it. The problem is that that tends to splash, and brake fluid's really not only extremely slippery, it's also really, really thin, so it tends to splash easily, go all over the place. So some people put down like plastic on the floor. The problem with that is that the stuff tends to splash a lot and it gets under your feet, and now you're ice skating. What you really want on the floor is maybe some old towels if you've got some that you don't care about, because they'll lay there, they'll absorb it sort of, and it won't let it splash. But what I really like putting down, and what's down there right now, is about 20 or 30 pounds of cat litter. I keep it in a 5-gallon bucket. I pour it out where I think I'm going to be making a mess. Drips on it, it absorbs it almost instantly, keeps it from splashing, and then when I'm done, I just shovel it back up, put it back into the bucket, and I'm done. Works really, really well. Use it for a long time. Eventually, when it's absorbed a lot, you throw it away. You spend another $3 on another 20-pound bag. So cat litter is your friend. Our first step is to disconnect the flexible brake line from the hard line that's feeding the caliper. And we're going to do that by loosening up this flare nut under here. Now, you can possibly use a 10mm end wrench, but there's a real danger of rounding it off. So a set of flare wrenches, flare nut wrenches, is like $10. And so really go spend the money. Make sure you do this right. We're going to just reach up here. It fits over the line and then up onto the nut. And we break it loose. Now, if I go much further, this is going to start leaking and dripping. And when I remove it, it's just going to continue to leak and drip out of here and make a mess. So we're going to take care of that by plugging the end of the hose with this 3/8 24 bolt. And like I said, brake fluid's not only really slippery, it's really thin, and so it's hard to get a seal with just a regular bolt in there. So what I do is I take a piece of heavy duty like lawn and garden bag, double it up, and put it over the bolt. That'll act like Teflon tape for plumbing connection and get you a good seal where it won't leak, or if it does still leak, it's a really, really slow drip, and whatever you've got on the floor, like cat litter, will handle it just fine. So let's take this apart. And as I try not to panic when brake fluid starts going all over the place, this is just plain and simple an incredibly messy job. You can see the brake fluid's already starting to leak out. Get it to a point where I can do this with my hand. It's slow and tedious. And the wrench is becoming incredibly slippery. And unfortunately, so is that connector, flare nut. There we go. Set the wrench down. Get my screw ready. And this connection is keyed and fits into this bracket, so you need to kind of wiggle it and get it to come out of there. Also, this thing here holds on to it. Come on. There we go. And just take your time with this, as sometimes it takes several shots to get the thing in there, because the line is slippery, your hand is slippery, the plastic is slippery, everything is slippery. Okay, It looks like if I don't have a complete seal, I'm pretty close. I'll just leave that hanging there. Get yourself a large roll of paper towels and have it handy, because wiping up and cleaning as you go helps a tremendous amount. Now we've got a T55 bit on here, and we've got 2 cap screws that are holding the caliper on. Okay. And just loosen them up, and then I'm going to transfer the bit over to my impact driver, purely to help get this out of here. And now, get a good hold of it. And be careful, because that hard line tends to get caught up or hung up in that bracket. And we're now free from the car. The messiness of this job continues on throughout. There's a lot of brake fluid come out of this caliper when we open it up. So I've got a bunch of newspaper laying down here, so that once I get the initial burst out here, I can kind of fold up the top half of it and get rid of it and clean up my work area. All right, so again, with the 10mm flare nut wrench, we're gonna go ahead and remove this connector and get this hard line off of here, just to get it out of our way. Make sure that as we're working, we're not gonna bend that thing up. Okay, so real quick anatomy lesson here. This is the body of the caliper. Here's your bleed plugs, bleed valves up at the top there. You can see in here, these are the caliper pistons. These, when you press on the brakes, these push inward and push the brake pads against the rotor. And you can see, hopefully right there, how they're burned up. They got fried. Now, these are not in such bad shape. The other ones were really bad in the other calipers, but this is definitely melted. This is screwed up a little bit, so going to the high temperature dust boots and seals is going to be a good choice. Now, we need to get the calipers out of here, and the best way to do that is with compressed air. I'm going to take, and here the port is where the brake fluid was coming in. We're going to put compressed air into that and push the pistons out. They're going to come out pretty fast, so we don't want them coming out and clanging against each other. Also, there is a tendency for these 2 pistons to come out and these 2 not to move at all. So in order to keep them clanging together, we're going to take and put a piece of plywood into the caliper, but we're going to do it in a particular way. We're going to put it in here from the bottom, and we're going to put it between the guide pins, and the guide pins will keep the plywood from moving completely one way or the other. So when we put in the compressed air, these pistons will come out, slam the plywood against these guide pins, and then they'll stop, and the pressure can get a chance to pop these calipers out. And hopefully, and many times, the calipers pop out and bring the dust boots with them. So that means we don't have to dig those out. So let's get this set up here and hopefully give you a view of the calipers coming out. I've got like, I think 70 or 80 PSI on this line. Probably way more than is actually needed, but I don't feel like going over and adjusting it. Okay. Might want to plug your ears for this. This gets loud. Come on. They came out too far. Doggone it. I don't know why these came on out. Now they're not getting a seal, and these pistons are not coming out. So let's go ahead and pull the dust boot off of this one and put this piston back in. So that one came out, but it didn't bring the dust boot with it. So let me see if I can wiggle this piston back in. No, let me go ahead and just tear off the dust boot and get this piston back in. Well, that's kind of weird. I've never had that happen, honestly, where it came completely out like that. All right, this is a pain, because that dust boot doesn't want to come out. All right, well, we can do a little lesson on getting a dust boot out. Oh, I'm not sure if this is really coming across on camera, but the dust boot is, if I turn it this way, it'll be easier to see. The dust boot sits in a groove there. This is one of those times you need to have a lot of patience, because it can often be quite tedious trying to get a dust boot out. You need to get in here. I'm using a dental pick to try and pry it out. Not working particularly well at the moment. You can try a very small screwdriver. Get it in. That seems to be working better. There we go. There we go. That came out. Now let's put this piston back in. And let me see if I can find something else to slide in here and give it a little bit more bracing. All right, this is why I keep buckets full of little tiny scraps of wood and metal, because they do come in handy so very, very often. Okay. All right, that's a lot tighter fit. So let's try this again. There, they all four popped out that time. All right, my life just got a lot easier. Ugh. Now they're clamped down with a death grip on the wood. Just work these caliper pistons. A lot of times you can just wiggle them and they'll come on out. They're a very tight machined fit, so if they get the least bit out of alignment, they'll jam. So just wiggle. Whoop. They're also very slippery. Same thing over here. They didn't bring the dust boots with them. At least not getting them completely loose. So again, I'll have to work at getting these dust boots to come out. All right, I think I might be better off just tearing these dust boots. Getting the pistons out of the way. All right, let's see if I can get these pistons out now. Boy, they are tightly in there. All right, so now using a screwdriver, right there. Patience. That's the real key to this. Don't get carried away and tearing stuff up. Of course, the fact that the whole caliper is slippery as anything is not helping there. Okay, here we go. Do notice that the caliper pistons are different sizes. Basically, it's the direction of rotation. So the pad, let's see, the rotor goes past it in this direction. So basically, the larger the larger caliper should be first in the line. I can't remember now, but there's a reason. It has to do with the efficiency of braking at different points on the rotor. Okay, got the pistons out. Let's take all these old dust boots and get them out of the way. Now we need to remove the old seals, and they're inside the cylinder bores. And oh, it's gonna be tough giving you a view of these. If you look in there, you can see them and you can feel them. They're a square cut, and this is where the dental pick comes in super handy. You kind of, gosh, I'm not sure how to describe this. You like slide it in beside, and then twist, and it'll pop it loose. You can get hold of it. This is impossible for me to give you a view of this, how I'm doing it. I'm having a little trouble seeing right now. Okay. Calmness. Calmness and patience. There we go. There's one right there. Kind of slide it in. Oh, I can't. I'm not on the camera. You kind of slide in beside it and twist around, and you're actually hooking in and digging into the seal to pull it out. There we go. Really like to give you a view of how I'm doing this. That seal's already loose. Okay, one more. Goodness. Okay. Just reaching in like this, twisting, and pulling it out. All right, the inner seals are gone. We still need to get these two dust boots off of here. The problem is that these are not soft rubber. They have a metal like frame in them, so you can't just dig into them as easily as you can the inner seals. Okay, that wasn't bad. I've had a much harder time getting dust boots out than that before. Thus my mantra, patience. Calm and patience, because otherwise I start throwing things. All right, let's get rid of these things, get them out of our way. All right, as you can see, a boatload of brake fluid has come out. And it's mixed up with the brake dust on there, so got kind of a mess here. Just taking a look at everything. All right, we got all the seals out. We got all the bits of dust boot. Gonna take and just try to wipe this down some. Get the large piles of dirty brake fluid off of it. Now, we just carefully push all this stuff to the side, and we start folding these over and finding a spot where most of the brake fluid has not soaked through. Carefully pull this out, and voila! a nice clean work surface. So some more paper towels. Set that down. Spray down my hands with some glass cleaner. Hands a bit, and then do the same thing for the brake caliper. We're just cleaning it up some, getting to where it's not quite so hard to handle, because you really don't want to drop this on the floor, especially the nice pretty painted one like this. All right. Most of this job is now done at this point. What's left is pretty simple. More clean paper towels, and we're going to come in here and carefully wipe and clean each piston. Paying a little bit of extra attention, make sure you get into this groove here on the end. Don't worry about the cup, that's not that important, because that doesn't get covered up anyway. The dust boot doesn't cover it. It's just going to get dirty again if you clean it. Okay, so let's get our reassembly started. Let's start off by identifying everything, the large versus the small pistons. And now take the small piston and put it in. Okay, that's a tight fit in that one. That's probably the small cylinder. And yes, it flops around. This is the large cylinder. So I personally like to put the large cylinder at the top. It just helps me out. And so we'll put the large pistons up top, the small pistons at the bottom. And over here, I'm going to have my large dust boots and inner seals, and my small dust boots and inner seals. Staying organized makes this a lot easier. We're going to start off with the inner seals. And Ohio Performance Solutions very kindly provides some seal lubricant, if I can find it. There it is. It fell over on the floor. And just put a little bit on here. And then take your fingers and just go around like this. Just spreading a nice even coating. And now there's about an eighth to 3/16 of an inch back inside the cylinder where you can feel the groove and see it quite easily. I like to take and put it in and get one edge started, and then go back and forth with my finger, just working it into the groove until I got about half of it seated, then reach in with the other finger and push the bottom edge in and continue working and just running my finger around, and the seal will pop right into place. Repeat that with the other small seal. Another way to keep this straight in terms of top and bottom is that the bleed plugs are on the top, and in this case that's where the large cylinders are at. And yeah, now that I think about it, yes, the large cylinders are always last in the rotation because of the way that the pad heats up. They give you there's a larger piston to even out the pressure. Again, put a little bit of our seal lube on there. All right, I'm going to reach in, set this top side, get it halfway. Now reach over, pop the bottom side into the cylinder, and continue working it. If you find that it's not seating right, you can't get it in, just don't get frustrated. Pull the whole thing out, start over again. And when I say I'm seating one side, I'm seating the upper side by hooking my finger underneath and just rubbing it back and forth. Okay. That one just jumped right into place. One more to go. Okay. This one's not going well, so we'll just pull it out and we'll start over again. This one's really giving me trouble. It's almost as if I've got the wrong size seal. Okay, now just going a little slower and carefully when I pushed in the bottom side, just carefully working it in so that it popped into place on its own. There we go. All well sealed. And more paper towels, another wipe down. And I like to reach in here and just clean out the cylinder bore a little bit. Now, let's get her reoriented again. Make sure, yep, large cylinders and pistons up to the top or away from me. So let's put the dust boots and get the cylinders back in. I put the dust boots on here, just hook one side and just work it around. It pops right into place. Now let's just grab it and twist it some, make sure it's seated in there. Then get the piston started in there until it touches the seal and then just squeeze. It feels like it won't go at first, but keep up the pressure and it'll drive home, and then use your fingers to seat the dust boot in that groove around the cylinder. Kind of messed up there. It's not super critical, but you should take and throw a drop of the seal lubricant onto the cylinder itself. It makes it a little easier to get in there. Take your time. I know I said that 20 times so far this video, but take your time. Be patient. Make sure you get all this seated correctly. Moving on to the large cylinders for the large pistons. Last one. Oops. Taking my thumbs and fingers and just running around that dust boot seal one last time. Make sure it's seated correctly. There you go. One fully built or rebuilt high temperature capacity or capable caliper. Let's put this thing back on. Oh, before we do that, one more round of glass cleaner. Get rid of some of the slipperiness of this brake caliper. Let's start off by reinstalling the hard line. Now, looking here, the end that has this clip thing, that goes to the flexible brake line. So this is the end that goes in here. And we're just gonna hand tighten it because it's got to be moved around and put into position. Okay, now we're ready to go back over to the car and reinstall the caliper and change out the brake line to the braided stainless steel. Now, the trickiest part, not really tricky, but the thing you need to pay most attention to with putting this caliper back on is making sure you get the hard line lined up into the hole in the bracket, because once you've got the caliper on, you can't just swing it in because of the way the angles work. So you got to kind of put the caliper in place at the same time while getting the bolts lined up. Excuse my big old head being in the way, because I got to look in here to see properly. Just starting it finger tight. Get the other one lined up. Now, Porsche says you're supposed to replace these bolts anytime you take them out with new ones. I don't know about that. Supposedly it has something to do with stretching the bolt or whatever, but I'm not going to do that right now. I haven't looked up the price on these. If they are not ludicrous, I might do that. But to be honest, a lot of times I feel that parts that Porsche tells you to replace, like on the brake calipers here, they want you to replace this little pin every time you change the brakes. I don't see the point. Same thing where they say, oh, you got to replace the spring every time, and the other little clip pin. And it's kind of like, all right, you're just trying to get me to buy parts. Okay, we've got this now where it's lined up. And actually that one wouldn't have been a problem. I've had a lot of trouble with these before, but this one's been okay in terms of being able to swing it up in there. But just keep that in mind. Let's go ahead while I'm thinking about it and get these bolts torqued down properly. The proper torque setting is 68 foot-pounds. Yes. 63 foot-pounds, if I'm reading this correctly. 63 foot-pounds. If I'm wrong on that, I'll put a note here somewhere. And we'll just take and go ahead and tighten that down a bit. Get it nice and seated in the line, and now we'll pull to torque. Caliper's back in. We're ready to reconnect that. Now it's time to replace the brake line. And this is going to be kind of tough, getting you an angle where you can see what I'm doing without me or the fender being in the way. I'm going to start off by making my life a little easier by unclipping this line out of the bracket here. I'm just squeezing together the prongs and then sliding it out. I don't know if I can show you here. It's just a little prong mechanism here that sticks through and clips into place. Just moving that out of my way. Now, if you'll remember, this connector here and the other end of the hard line into the caliper were 10 millimeter. You need a flare nut wrench. Naturally, this one is 11 millimeters. Let's see. I gotta visualize which I gotta turn this to loosen it. Now again, we're gonna have a bit of a mess here. You can see it's already flowing. I'm gonna grab myself some paper towels here and just kind of stick it up in here to try and catch some of this. So it'll be a little bit less of a mess. So we're going to take and pull this out of here and then replace the whole thing with the braided stainless steel line. Now, keep in mind that these connections are actually keyed. All right? They fit into the bracket and lock into place. And so you've got to get them in the right orientation. That can be kind of tough, trying to twist this into the bracket position. But it does have a, I don't think you can really see this, there are flats on each side of this. So you'll need a 5/8 inch end wrench. So a 5/8 inch end wrench will fit that and let you twist these a bit to get them into place. So have that on handy. Again, 5/8. Yeah, you may be thinking, wait a minute, this is a Porsche. Why are these fittings like this bolt was 3/16 and the wrench to fit this is 5/8? And I don't know. I don't know why this one part seems to be SAE versus everything else on the car is metric, but we're going to go with it. Going back to my 11mm flare nut wrench. Space is really at a premium in here, so can't do much turning. Again, don't rush. This is going to be a mess no matter what, so just resign yourself to that and go slowly and carefully and just know it's going to be a mess. I probably should have broken, I don't know if you can see it here, but this wire continues up both of these into a clip here. I probably could have done this easier if I had removed those and gotten the whole thing loose first, but kind of too late now. Oh goodness. Okay, this is loose enough where I can do it with my fingers, I think. There we go. Take and pull the bolt out of this, and I'm just going to toss it right down into the cat litter and let it drain down there. Okay, coming back in with our braided stainless steel line. Again, find those notches and figure out which way this is supposed to align. And you may be wondering about these little clips here. I'm not positive. I think they're designed to provide back pressure against the flare nut so that it doesn't, or that it's more resistant to backing out on its own. If anybody knows for sure about that, let me know in the comments. Ugh. Such tight quarters makes getting this slippery flare nut started even more challenging. There we go. Ooh, buddy, this wrench is slippery. There's brake fluid all over it. And you can see it's starting to leak out the end of it. I could cap that with the bolt, but it's not that big a deal. I'm finished now. Reach over here and get the other size wrench ready. Get this fitting into position and go. There we go. Oh, all right. Get my 5/8 wrench because I've got the wheel pulled out so far. Okay. Let me just tell you, I can tell you from experience, that is so much easier than trying to do that with just your hand, because the brake fluid is so slippery you can't get hold of it. There we go. Back to the 10 millimeter. Probably should tilt the camera down, but my hands are covered in brake fluid. I don't want to touch the camera at this point. Okay, now from what I recall, Porsche does give you a spec, at least on this flare nut, of how many foot-pounds or inch-pounds you're supposed to tighten it to. I don't know how you do that, because I don't know of a flare nut torque wrench. There probably is one, I'm sure. And I'm sure that somebody like Snap-on sells one for like 700 bucks. Tighten up this one on the caliper now. Again, I'm just, my dad used to drive me nuts. I talked to him about getting a torque wrench when I was little and just starting to work on cars. He'd say, well, this is my torque wrench. Kind of irked me. I came home when I was in my 20s, and he's got like 4 torque wrenches laying around at that point. He'd seen the light, I guess, on torque wrenches. Oh, gotta go back to the 11 millimeter. I got everything all nice and tightened back up and did a good thorough job cleaning up everything, making sure to get all the brake fluid wiped up, especially around the connections. And that way, once I was finished and did some road testing and came back in, I could see if there was any seepage where a connection wasn't quite tight. Thankfully, I didn't find any of that. After getting everything tightened up, then I had to do a brake bleed on all 4 corners. And that was, of course, we had drained all the brake fluid out of the line and the caliper. And so we needed to flush out all the air and get them refilled with brake fluid. And pretty simple process. If you need some instructions on how to bleed your brakes, I'll give you a link to the one that I did up in this corner here. And after that, took it out for a test drive. And I gotta say, I wasn't expecting some kind of massive performance change from just rebuilding the calipers and changing out the brake lines. And of course, from rebuilding the calipers, I would expect no difference at all, because all I was doing was replacing the existing stock seals and dust boots with high temperature versions. They weren't there to increase braking performance, just to improve its resistance to heat. Now, as for the stainless steel brake lines, I wasn't expecting any kind of a huge difference, because the primary focus of that is for track use. But in my testing, I found that at the extreme limit of pedal travel, when I was braking as hard as I possibly could, that it felt like there was just a little bit less of the slight mushiness that I used to feel. But to be honest, the effect was so subtle and slight that if you told me I was just imagining it, I wouldn't argue with you too hard about that. Again, I was just doing my testing on the street at street speeds, maybe a little bit higher, but at street speeds and nowhere near the kind of temperatures that I'd be seeing on the track. And so that's really the purpose of the stainless steel brake lines. And indeed, this entire upgrade is track performance. And hopefully I'll see a more pronounced change when I'm really pushing this on the track this week at Sebring. Just to reemphasize, the purpose of all these upgrades, the rotors, the pads, rebuilding the calipers, the stainless steel brake lines, and what I'm going to be doing in the next episode, which is to upgrade the master cylinder to the 911 GT3 version. The point of all this is for track performance, taking your Porsche out on the track. Now, if you don't take your Porsche out on the track, and honestly, if you're not, you're missing out. You should at least once in your life take your Cayman or take your Porsche out on the track and really see what it can do. Now, as I said, if you're just going to street the car, you're never going to track it, then there is no point in you doing any of this. You're not going to see any benefit. And in fact, you'll see a downside. These racing pads, they're not all that effective when they're cold, although they're pretty good. I think even cold, they're better than the stock pads, but they're not designed to work in the cold, and they squeal like crazy. So you wouldn't want to use these for street pads. Likewise, as I discussed before, the stainless steel brake lines actually aren't all that great for the street. They have potentially shorter life because they're more susceptible to cracking and breaking. What else do we do? The rotors. You're going to get slightly better wet braking performance from the stock drilled rotors. And the GT3 master cylinder, that's something where you might actually feel it on the street and just using it day-to-day driving. Will it really make a difference to you? Probably not. You know, it's not something that you're going to go, oh, wow, I've been missing out by not having a GT3 master cylinder. So I wouldn't recommend any of this unless you're going to track the car. That's it for this episode. But wait, before you go down there, find that thumbs up button, give the video a like, and let YouTube know that you enjoyed it. That really helps with growing the channel. And if you're not one of my subscribers, while you're down there, go find that big, shiny, red subscribe button and give it a click. Doesn't cost a thing to subscribe to the channel. It just lets YouTube know that you're enjoying the content that I'm producing. And again, helps grow the channel and helps me produce more content. And finally, if you want to keep up with everything that I'm doing here in the garage, including all the upgrades for the Cayman as part of Project 987.2, the upgrades to the garage that I'm doing, the other projects that I'm working on, go find that bell icon and give it a click. It changes shape, and that lets you know that you've turned on notifications for this channel. And that way, YouTube will let you know every time that I post something new from here in Cliff's Garage. I'll see you next time.